Good day everyone. This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardenes, to use this as an educational material. So today we will discussing about the self from the perspective from the various philosopher. Socrates' perspective of the self. Socrates' perspective of the self is through the philosopher's take on the soul. But for Socrates, concept of the soul should not be viewed from the vantage of point of view of Christianity, that is a religious conception of the soul. It's important to note that ancient Greeks lived long before the existence of Christianity, so that for them, the concept of the soul did not have the same religious connotation that it has for today. When Socrates said or speaks of the soul, he means to refer to a thinking and willing subject. With conception of the soul, thinking and willing, it is safe for us to assume that soul for Socrates is the intellectual and moral personality of humans. So when Socrates said that soul is the essence of the human person, he meant that it is the soul or self. For Socrates, it is the responsible agent of knowing and acting rightly and wrongly. In other words, for Socrates, the soul is the person's true self. In fact, Socrates said that when we turn inward in search for self-knowledge, we would eventually discover our true self. For Socrates, our soul or self is the essence of human person, which constitutes our personality. Plato's perspective of the self. Plato's perspective of the self can be gleaned from his notion of the soul. For him, the true self is the soul and not the body. Plato contends that the self of the human person is the rational soul, which is separable from the body. That is the reason or the intellect that constitutes the person's soul. Plato's concept of the self is practically constructed on the basis of his reflections on the nature of the soul as the highest form of cognition. Plato said that the soul is the immaterial and indestructible, and the soul is an entity distinct from the body. For Plato, the soul is the self. According to him, the soul, conceived of as self, has three parts. The rational soul, which located in the head that enables the persons to think, reflect, analyze, and do other cognitive functions. The second one is the spiritual soul, located in the chest that enables the human person to experience happiness, joy, sadness, anger, and other emotional feelings. And lastly is the appetitive soul located in the abdomen. This part of the soul drives the human person to experience physical pain, hunger, thirst, and other physical wants. Aristotle's perspective of the self. Aristotle's perspective of the self is more complicated as he talked so many things about this. For Aristotle, the human person is a rational animal that thinks. If you are thinking how did Aristotle come up with this idea that the human person is just an animal that thinks, well, for him, the soul is the principle of life that enables us to live. For Aristotle, all living beings have souls. Aristotle distinguishes three levels of soul, namely vegetative soul, sensitive soul, and the rational soul. Vegetative soul is present in plants. According to him, plants have soul because it possesses three requirements for something to be called a living being. That is the capacity itself to grow, reproduce, and feed itself. The second one is sensitive soul, which is present in animals. Sensitive soul is present in animals and it is capable to grow, reproduce, feed itself, and sensation. While the remaining one is the rational soul, which is present in human person. Rational soul, on the other hand, is same with animals or the sensitive soul. It is capable also to grow, reproduce, feed itself, sensation, but it also have capable of thinking, which is sensitive soul don't have. And this what Aristotle mean that humans are only animals that think.
Next is medieval philosophy. Medieval philosophy is the philosophy of Western Europe from about 400 to 1400 AD, roughly the period between the fall of Rome and the Renaissance. The medieval philosophers are the historical successors of the philosophers of antiquity, but they are in fact only tenuously connected with them.
Saint Augustine had a complex and dynamic perspective about the self. He believed that the human self is a combination of the body and soul, and that it the fundamental, incomplete without a connection to God. He viewed he viewed the self as a being in a state of constant flux, both in the terms and changing physical body and the involving of spiritual journey. Saint Augustine emphasized the importance of self-reflection and introspection, recognizing the inherent flawed and sinful nature of humanity. He believed that self self is constant need to redemption and growth, and the ultimate goal is to become a fully integrated with God. In his works, Saint Augustine explored the themes of memory, times, and identify, and how they relate the self. He argued that the self is always in state of becoming, and that the past, present, and the future are all important aspects of our identity. He also emphasized the importance of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding in the development of the self. In conclusion, Saint Augustine's perspective about the self is one of continual growth, self-reflection, and a striving towards in unity with God. He recognized the complexity of the human self and believed that it is shaped by both our physical and spiritual experiences. Anthony de Bello believed in the importance of self-awareness and inner exploration. He encouraged individuals to look beyond their thoughts, emotions, and external experiences and connect with the deeper essence of being. He saw the self as a complex web of beliefs, desires, and fears that often obscure our true nature and prevents us from experiencing peace and happiness. De Mello believed that the self is not a fixed entity but a constant evolving and changing construct. He argued that our sense of self is largely shaped by our beliefs and experiences, and that we can transform it thoughts from the practice of self-awareness. This in turn leads to a deeper understanding of the self and ability to live in the present moment free from the fear and anxiety. He encouraged individuals to question their beliefs and challenge their assumption about themselves and the world around them. By examining these beliefs, De Mello believed that individuals could move beyond their ego based sense of the self experience deeper connection with the divine. In his teaching, De Mello emphasized the need to cultivate self-awareness and inner peace through practice like meditation and mindfulness. He believed that these practices help individuals to connect with their true nature, break from the limiting beliefs, and experience greater joy and fulfillment in their lives. In conclusion, De Mello believes perspective on the self characterized by his belief in the power of the self-awareness, inner exploration, and spiritual practices to help individuals transformation their sense of self and live more fulfilling lives. He encouraged individuals to question their beliefs and challenge their assumptions, and to cultivate self-awareness as means of experiencing deeper inner peace and greater connection with the divine.
Next is modern philosophy. Modern philosophy is a philosophy developed in the modern era and associated with modernity. Next is René Descartes. As a famous line in This is a cogito ergo sum, or I think therefore I am. He wants to tell us that no one ever doubts his or our experience. In the early 1640s, Descartes took a stand about his own perception of the self, arguing that the self can be correctly considered as either a mind or a human being, and that the self's properties vary accordingly. For example, the self is understood to be simple when it is mind and composite when it is a human being. In short, the self as a thinking entity, then, and the self as a physical body. Descartes is a mind dualism. He notes either the view that mental phenomena are non-physical or that the mind body are distinct and separable. Next philosopher is John Locke. Is known for his theory that the blank slate or tabula rasa. This principle states that at birth, the mind of the person is a blank state, without any innate ideas or knowledge. He believed that all knowledge, ideas, and understanding come from experience and sensation. He also believed that the mind is composed of two types of ideas: those that are inborn or innate, and those that are acquired through our experience. All what you see, or what you feel, and what you smell is considered the self to be founded on consciousness. David Hume said that there is no self. Why David Hume said that there is no self? There is the answer why. David Hume continued in the empiricist tradition of John Locke, believing that the source of all genuine knowledge is our direct sense of experience. Using the same empiricist principles as Locke, Hume ends up with an even more startling conclusion if we carefully examine our sense experience through the process of introspection. We discover that there is no self. How is this possible? From Hume's perspective, this astonishing belief is the only possible conclusion, consistent with an honest and objective examination of our experience. Next philosopher is Immanuel Kant. The self for Immanuel Kant is something real, and yet is neither appearance nor thing in itself, but rather has some third status. Appearances for Kant arise in the space and time, where these are respectively forms of outer and inner intuition. He believes that self is a product of reason, a regulative principle because the self regulates experience by making unified experience possible. Other such transcendental regulative ideas include the ideas of cosmos and God. It is the self is constructing and organizing principles of experiences which creates a world that familiar, predictable, and significantly be called as mind. For example, I myself is the one who's discovering the world, for I am the driver of my life. Nobody will do it for me, for it transcends the experience and my mind's as well as the sense of mind.
Paul Chartland perspective about self. Since Chartland is a modern day philosopher who studies the brain, let's first take a look at some other philosophical theories. For much, uh, for much of history, many Western philosophers had held to the theory of dualism. When it comes to discussing human, separate in other words, we all have a physical brain, but will also but distinct dualists have historical asserted the mind the seat of our consciousness. Because the mind is the seat of our consciousness, is what gives us our identity. No, we can't see it. It is it or touch it, give us up, but does exist. To the assertion, Paul Churton has come along and pretty much dualism. I don't think so. Tossing aside the concept of dualism and the brain, since Charlan asserts that the mind doesn't really exist. Based on this assertion, Charlan holds to eliminate that the ordinary folk psychology of the mind is wrong, that gives our sense of self. Charlan proved his points. He give a few arguments. First, why should we believe a mind when science is proving that mental health is connected to the physical brain? Chartland challenges that the concept of mind by using the misfortune of traumatic brain injury. Chartland assert that the concept of the self is original in the physical brain, not an invented mind. Let's talk about of Husserl, his concept about self. Husserl speak about self, the monad, as the experience totally of oneself. Within it, we can abstractively distinguish constitutive levels, all the way down to the free illogical flow of time consciousness, quite unlike the ordinary experience, as the ontological correlate being itself just a meaning categories as a correlates logic is a formal theory of judgment, that they study the formal of relation among judgments using meaning of categories. That's the concept of about self of Husserl. And now let's talk about Merleau-Ponty, his concept about self. Merleau-Ponty focus on the way in, with our embodiment is central to our consciousness, and self pushing away from seeing this as a isolatable and reducible phenomena inside the brain. Ponty believed the physical body to be an important part of what makes up the subjective self. Based on the Ponty theory of the self, perception is the background of the experience which guides every conscious action.
Alright, Merleau-Ponty. The self is embodied subjectivity. According to him, all the knowledge of every individual comes from the inner world of subjective phenomena of experience that people are aware in everything within its consciousness. For example, our body won't function or move unless being said or commanded by our brain, where the two of them were not separated.
Next is postmodernism. They called postmodernism because it denies the existence of any ultimate principles, and it lacks the optimism of there being a scientific, philosophical, or religious truth which will explain everything for everybody, a characteristic of the so-called modern mind.
Michael Foucault saw an alternative and Hellenistic model of practices of the self, which inspired him to sketch an ethics of taking care of oneself as practice of freedom. Taking care of the self always aims for the well-being of others, which implies that the power relation should be managed by in a non-authoritarian manner. Michael Foucault's endorsement of an aesthetics of existence as an ethical response to putative retreat of universal moral codes has been criticized as a dangerous formula for an ethics of self-fashioning, which philosophically under unities, narcissism, and aesthetic correctly. A Foucauldian care of the self, so the argument goes, leads to deficit of cares for others. Richard Rorty. Rorty's views is that we should treat vocabularies for deliberation about public goods and social and political arrangements. On one hand, and vocabularies developed or created in pursuit of personal fulfillment, self-creation, and self-realization. On the others, as distinct tools. Eastern philosophy. Generally, Eastern philosophy views the self as an illusion. Eastern religions believe that we are all interconnected and part of a greater universal world. Hindus believe that the Atman or human soul is a part of Brahman. So the soul of God. Atman is part of Brahman and therefore cannot be a completely separate entity or self. Buddhists believe that we are all so interconnected that there can be no distinction of self made between us, and the self is ultimately an illusion. Eastern philosophy believes that the self composed of each person's personal identify, consciousness, and core philosophies is an illusion. They deny the existence of the independent entity of self that Westerners posit does exist.